Welcome to the Campground Catalyst Podcast, the show dedicated to fueling success in outdoor hospitality. Whether you're an outdoor adventurer, a campground owner, or looking to build your legacy in outdoor hospitality, you're right where you need to be. We're here to guide you through the fascinating world of campground management, unique real estate strategies, and the gratifying opportunities created by outdoor hospitality. Our mission is to inspire and equip you with the knowledge and insights you need to build a successful business and create a legacy worth leaving. The Campground Catalyst Podcast is proudly sponsored by Beyonder Camp, your trusted outdoor hospitality experts. Subscribe now, join our active online community, and let's ignite our passions and potential together. Welcome back to the Campground Catalyst Podcast. I'm Adam here with Robert, Don, and Justin. What's going on, fellas?
How are you doing?
Hey. Glad to
All
be
right,
back.
we're back. Yeah, back at least in physical form, maybe not in full health yet, right, Justin?
That's right.
All right, very good. Today we're bringing you another segment from the Campfire Cash Flow segment of the show. Today we're going to be talking about mitigating risks and risk management. So first, I'd love to share. I bet Robert's probably got the most relevant example for us. But yeah, what's the biggest risk center or the biggest maybe incident we've had recently that really drives home the point of why we focus on risk management? Putting you on the spot.
I think it's how many times you put up a sign that this is an off-limits area and you have someone stumble into it. And usually it's not the kids. Usually it's the adults. And even if there's not alcohol involved with it, they still want to go to areas that they're not supposed to go into. And then they wonder why there's, whether they drive their car down a particular road or whether they themselves go down. And then they wonder why there's issues. Well, there's no place to turn around. There's no way to be able to get out of there. There's snakes on that particular path. So it's always the adults not following the signs.
If you're talking about snakes, you must be talking about Alabama or Louisiana.
In the summer, it could be most anywhere, especially when you have it by the marinas or by the Ohio River in Indiana with our park, and then our own lakes. The critters are attracted to the same places you are. That's what you're trying to get away to, is the rest and relaxation, and those varmints are going to be there, shall we say?
Well, that's exactly right. And we all, we place things on our website that say, look, we're outdoors, right? Like that's part of it, and there's a risk associated with that. And a lot of people know my own daughter's story of getting bitten by a rattlesnake at a campground in California, and that was just right along the road. She wasn't even going anywhere. She's literally standing outside the driver's side door. So it's like the risk is inherent when you're outside. Can't totally avoid it no matter what you do, but yeah, we're here to talk about maybe ways to mitigate it as best as we can.
Well, it's also on people to be smart about it. Like as Robert's example about people not, it's like they see the signs of stay on trails or off limits as a challenge. Like, oh, I can prove that that's not the case. It's funny because I live near Yellowstone Park. I think as the listeners may know, but every year there's cases of people that step off the trails, step onto those areas where there's the geysers and these things that can literally kill you. And there's always people that like end up falling into one of the hot springs, and it's like, well, now there's a foot floating because the rest of them dissolved. So it's very smart to stay on the trails, listen to what it says, and take heed to that, and don't be stupid. And so obviously it's up to the campground owners to do our part also to warn people, at least put up the signs, if nothing else. Hey, at your own risk, do not go past this barrier here or whatever. Don't go down this road. But there's always going to be some people that just don't want to listen.
I always like the pictures of people taking selfies with bison. That's always a fun one at Yellowstone too. So, but the foot floating, that's a good visual for us to dive into this today. Yeah, exactly. So, obviously there's some grotesque stories, things you can think about of things that grotesque. That's a new combination of gruesome and grotesque. But, so you can think of some worst case scenarios that can happen in a campground. But, from our own experience, it's a lot of the more mundane things that can really expose you to liability. And this is why we always hammer this home on our underwriting and when we're looking at properties, is having the proper insurance coverages in place and making sure that, we are protecting ourselves from all the potential risks that can come up, because some of them aren't always going to be the blood bloody, gory things. Some of them are going to be, the person who gets on your campground Wi-Fi and hacks in and somehow gets people's credit card information and exposes you to that liability on that front. I think one of my favorite stories to really drive home the point of not just the insurance too, but also your policies and enforcing those has to do with the very first campground we bought and some backlash that Justin and I felt when we were on site learning the campground business and how to run a campground. And it had to do with golf carts. Justin, probably remembers this, vividly and how badly we upset everybody when we imposed a golf cart policy, because before kids could drive golf carts on this property, anybody could do it. The former owners had a policy about having insurance on file, but they didn't enforce it. It was something that was very loosely enforced, I should say. And, the funny thing was we put this policy in place. We took all kinds of backlash. We had people bad talking us everywhere, but it ended up working out in our favor because I think it was 2 or 3 months later, we had a teenager driving a golf cart through the campground, violated our policy there, the parents letting them do it. Fortunately, we had their insurance on file because when the kid crashed into a camper, it caused a minimal amount of damage, but it was still damage and that camper wanted his camper fixed. We had the insurance information for the owner of that golf cart and we were able to make it right. But had we not done that, that could have been something that was 100% on us. So any other stories I'm missing that you guys want to share?
Well,
yeah,
we can probably, there's a lot of different things, but one of the requirements of our insurance at a lake in particular, the boats and what are the jet skis and, what happens if, someone drowns. I mean, there's a lot of what ifs that these insurance companies are going after. And we don't have any of these, what was the word? Grotesque, gross, the negative word.
Grotesque is the new word. Yeah.
I just wanted to follow your lead there, but a lot of the what ifs, we're always trying to avoid, and the safety is always one of those things where if you've done your job, you don't know what you've accomplished because you have been safe and you've minimized anything that could or should or could have happened in the future. So a lot of the things that come back from the insurance companies are, what policies do you have? What happens if? And what do you do if? And who's in charge? Who gets called? They're all very important questions and answers that you have to think through because little things like having a phone at the pool. Little things that are required in the event of an emergency, right? So it's not always what has happened; it's what can happen that you really want to be thinking about.
I'd say a good component of that too is having the right partner on that side, on the insurance front. Obviously, and I think we've discussed this before on more the purchasing side. When you see insurance costs in some of these campgrounds we look at, and we've looked at 200 site campgrounds that are paying $5,000 a year for insurance, which I take one look at that and I know they don't have proper coverage. There's no way they do. They went to their Allstate agent and said, "Yeah, we need campground coverage," and they said, "Yeah, sure thing. We'll tack it on as another, with your auto in your home." But if you start looking into those policies and the declarations on those, you realize they're exposed to so much liability. Maybe the roof on the building is covered, but they're not protected from casualty or most important, the liability side of things. And that's where we find the most exposure comes from. Justin, you mentioned jet skis and watercraft. That's been a recent one for us that I know Robert's been heavily involved in with us. And I'll tell you what, if we didn't make so much dang money off of jet skis, I'd say we just sell them and not deal with the headache that comes with insurance and that. It was funny when we went through getting insurance on jet skis. It was a new thing for us. And the requirements in place to put, people had to wear at least a wetsuit bottom, and of course, we brought up the question, we rented jet skis before and nobody requires that. There's one carrier in the country who will carry jet skis and they require that. So if you're riding a jet ski somewhere for rental and you're not wearing a wetsuit bottom, they're probably not insured, and if you have an accident, they may not have the resources to protect you. So just interesting when you see what people throw to the wind, like, Justin, you mentioned the pool phone, that's a requirement that's often put on your insurance rider when you have a pool that doesn't have a lifeguard, which most campgrounds have. And if you aren't abiding by it, heaven forbid you have a drowning on site and that comes up that you didn't follow that, the insurance is going to cover and you're going to be hammered.
And in order to get to the point where the insurance company said you needed a wetsuit bottom, it was a 19-page procedure of how is our staff going to be trained? What was the forms that are going to be filled out? What happens to the forms? What briefings are you going to get? Almost like renting a car. What checkout are you going to do before the rig goes out, the jet ski or the boat goes out? And what is going to be the checklist when it comes back in? So it really had to be very meticulous. I know I also get that reputation of going around the campgrounds and coming up with these what ifs and saying, that has to be taken care of. This has to be taken care of. What are you even looking at? And you having to take that. I think that dovetails into the next step of it, of your training and documentation of who you have. If you're an owner operator yourself, you have it in your head. But what about that one day that you want to take off? Have you trained the other individuals? Is there a notebook or an online wiki that's available for someone to look up and be able to see the training so that they know what is it that they're supposed to follow, what are the steps and procedures, so that you can really, the training and the manuals are your, for lack of a better term, your get out of jail free card, because the guest is going to say, I didn't know. Yes, here's the terms and conditions. Yes, here's the waiver. Yes, here's the email that was sent to you after you checked out. And yes, here is the training documentation that our staff went through. Okay, we've taken care of our side. I wonder whose fault this was.
Yeah. And Robert, you made a great point there mentioning the training and the manuals. And I think so often we've walked into a campground we've bought and we found, they have a policy manual. You pull it out and you dust you dust the top of it off because it's never been opened in a long time. They wrote it for their insurance policy. They made sure they had it in place. But if you went around and interviewed the employees, what do you do if there's a bodily fluid leakage? Most of them have no idea. It's not practiced. And I think that negligence is not going to hold up if you end up with a claim.
And it's an expense. I mean, our entire staff at our marina RV park today is they're taking a 2-hour, 3-hour period where they're doing an all hands staff training to get ready for the season. Do I like to see that when it comes through on the payroll? No. Do I like to see it as to the benefits that it gives for the guest experience and what it will create for the environment that we're trying to do, and then being able to check those boxes with the insurance? Okay, we'll do that, and we'll gladly have that all staff training.
Yep. There are two other things we need to think about. Obviously, there's the one side that it's most easy to think about is guests hurting themselves, because that's the most common thing that comes to mind when you think those risk mitigations. But I think there are two other important ones we need to consider as business owners. One of those is going to be, of course, this is more recently needed, is the cyber protections. That's something that we get bundled in with ours, making sure that, as we talked about, we've got a great network guy that segregates our networks, the campground Wi-Fi from our office, but heaven forbid you get somebody who's savvy and is able to somehow hack in and get personal information. It's just making sure you're covered on that. But I think the even bigger and most important is loss of business income, because these campgrounds have incredible overhead. We have so many expenses on these things. And if we have a tornado or a hurricane comes through that tears us up in our biggest time, we've experienced this. We had a tornado incident last year. Without that coverage, or without proper coverage in that area, you might be left holding the bag with some pretty significant expenses, and an inability to keep paying your note and your employees. So, any thoughts from you guys on that front?
Let's piggyback on weather is.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Justin.
I was just going to mention the loss of business income. Sometimes the question is, well, how much, right? And that's imperative as well, because you can say you have it, but we like to say 12 months worth of loss of business income, and that's to cover you for a full year, and that's catastrophic, right? Like that's obviously, like, you're probably not going to be closed for 12 months. That's the idea, but also that income could accelerate, especially during a busy time of year for your business. And so that income for a week or 2 or 3 could be worth 3 or 4 or 5 months. So you want to try to accelerate to increase your loss of income to up to a year, in our opinion, not just to say you have it.
Yeah, and actually, I'm going to add something to that too. If you're talking with different insurance folks, the question I'd have for them when they're quoting you on that loss of business income, like Justin mentioned, 12 months, is it a 12-month event, or is it 12 months annualized? How are they looking at that? Like if they're saying, hey, this place for simplicity's sake made 1.2 million last year. Okay, great. For every month you're closed, we're going to give you $100,000. Well, what if, you're closed for 3 weeks during, the peak season in July? Are they going to give you the $300,000 you missed out on because it's part of 1.2, or are they only going to give you, 75,000 because it's 3 weeks out of 4 weeks in a month and they annualize it? So really important questions to ask, and how they're calculating that if you're putting together that policy. Because if it's too low in price, it may not, and it doesn't have the right coverages in it, it may not actually be there to protect you.
And also brings up a point from our previous episodes talking about maintaining your books accurately. That's going to be your saver there, is to say, yeah, we make this much during this time. Going back to a previous point though, as well as people may want to say we can save money, cut down our expenses by going with this cheaper insurance or something, or even not being covered for like jet skis in your case. Many people might think they can get by with just a waiver. You have their guests sign a waiver that they waive their rights to sue, whatever. That's not going to do anything. That's just more of a preventative measure to scare people away from suing, but that's not going to stop them from suing and winning. A waiver is just kind of a first line of defense, but it's not really a thing to protect you.
Yeah, a first-year lawyer is going to be able to poke holes in that waiver. And especially the most common I see is where you stick the language in your terms and conditions on your reservation check-in. And, that's not going to stand up anywhere in hold water. You need to be protecting yourself, because I'll tell you what, you have an incident on your property. People are going to hire an attorney, and they're going to try to find every exposure you have.
So it's another layer that you have of putting that in place. You brought up weather. Probably for 20 years of my life, I never paid attention to the weather except for one weekend in May to see what the weather was going to be for the Indy 500. Since I started RVing and now actually managing RV parks, weather is something I pay attention to, trying to predict, trying to know what types of things are coming up, and then your guest communications. If you know that there's going to be something coming up from weather, a hard freeze, well, that affects your own pipes and their equipment. A particular type of storm, straight line winds. It doesn't always have to be a tornado. Paying attention to those types of things so that you can communicate it out to the guest and at least give them a heads up and a warning. Again, that provides another layer of protection for us as park operators and as the owner.
Yep.
Yeah, love
absolutely.
the weather talk. We have a marina, and the weather affects the wind, straight line winds affect that marina significantly. And, if we don't have the team in place, the correct training in place, the foresight to make sure that our cables are tied down correctly to the anchors on that marina, that thing could just be waffling in the wind, and that is obviously not a good thing. So, just making sure that you're watching, you're setting your standards every morning, every evening, making sure that our cables are set to the location they need to be set at. That kind of goes back to the training talk too, but just forecasting, making sure that everything is buttoned down, ready to go. Staff informed, if you've got any tornadoes coming. I mean, I don't sit around my trailer going, oh, I wonder if there's a tornado coming. I'm just having a good time, So training your staff to make sure they're watching for those things and informing the people as events could unravel.
Yep.
Even with that, including as part of the procedures, is like the manual. There's what to do in a case of that. Like if there is a tornado, do you get all your guests to come to like the bathhouse, or where have a place to gather, or so there must be an emergency plan in place for those types of extreme events.
And we pay extra for a text service to make sure that we're able to text our guests that are on site to have that information. So we've probably brought up now 4 or 5 things that are extra expenses that if you looked at it strictly from a business standpoint, or basically the business environment we're in of cut, it'll end up costing you in the end if you cut certain items. And these are areas that you just really don't want to skimp on.
Yeah, you can cut flesh, you can cut muscle, but you don't cut bone. That's stuff you need in place to protect your business. I think the last big risk center that we have in campgrounds that owners need to really consider is the employee liability, and some of the things that you need to have in place to protect yourself from any incidents with employees. Some of those are going to include things like having proper workman's comp coverage and making sure that if you have a work camper in, for example, somebody who is trading time for a site, that their compensation is structured in such a way that workman's comp will cover them. If you're bartering and you aren't doing the proper things with your human resources, if you don't have a good human resources person or PPO that is handling this for you, you may have people who are working without proper protection. So that's a big consideration as well. Some other things to consider are, and in this world we're in nowadays, making sure that we have sexual harassment training in place and at least a policy for how, we handle the reporting of those incidents. That's something that you don't want to find yourself on the other side of because one employee got a little too friendly with another one. So any others you guys can think of on the employment front?
We've staffed up this year, and every single park, it's like a bingo card. We filled it out. Every single park has had one employee that we've had to, or potential employee that we've turned away because of background check. Going through the information and looking at, especially if they're going to be driving vehicles, has there been particular items, because that will disqualify you on your insurance. Even if they're driving a golf cart, the insurance company finds out that you have somebody that has past issues. And then just from the background, whether it be sexual predator, making sure you check those lists, and any sorts of felonies, those types of things. So yeah, we've been able to check off that every park has had in some cases, very overqualified candidates that are looking to work, and they were so willing to work because they had something that was just a disqualifier in their background check.
Don, Justin, any additional on the employees front?
No, I think we kind of covered it. The training is big. As we've grown, we've got an HR team of sorts. We've got a lot of additional resources for those single park operators. Sitting down with your team. We help our GMs on this front, but if you're a single park operator, you're going to be probably the one on site, and just making sure you're sitting down with your team once a week at least. Just take a little bit of extra time. Robert's our kind of weekly trainer for our GMs, and we take an hour of time each week to make sure that we're giving some additional details. But while you're on site, you talk about a sexual harassment policy. Well, you probably need 10 minutes to really go over something with your people. It doesn't take that long in the end, but just making sure you're covering your bases and set aside time block is what we talk about a lot. Time block your time with your team and making sure they understand.
Yeah, and also some of that depends on what state you're in. So making sure that you're, really keeping in touch with your counsel. We've looked this up in the past. I think it's New York and California. Don't quote me on that, but I think they have mandated sexual harassment trainings that you have to put all your staff through every year. So if you're not meeting that requirement, you may actually have legal consequences in addition to any other exposure you're putting yourself in front of. So it's just one of those things where it pays, again, not to go cheap on this. Get your professionals in on the front end. Check with your attorneys what you need to do. Check with your insurers what you need to do. Make sure you got a good set of policies and that you're enforcing them uniformly across the board. In our Patreon group, we're going to be discussing any other questions you might have that, specifically to this. This is something that owners really need to be focusing on, making sure that you're best protected, because this is a fun business. The reason most of us got into this is because we love the outdoors. We love hospitality, being in front of people, but we have to make sure that we are still treating this as a profession and that we are approaching this as professionals and really, putting our best foot forward and doing the right thing. So again, jump on Patreon if you have any questions, comments, or anything to add to this discussion here today. We look forward to seeing you on there. This has been another episode of Campground Catalyst. We thank you so much for joining us today.
Have a good one.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Campground Catalyst Podcast, where we take you behind the scenes in the fun and gratifying world of outdoor hospitality. We hope you were inspired by today's show and better equipped to take the next steps in your journey. Remember, you can continue the conversation and connect with fellow enthusiasts by visiting our website and joining the Campground Catalyst community on Patreon at campgroundcatalyst.com. There, Patreon members get exclusive access to special listener perks, they get their opportunity to engage with the host, and they get their questions answered on one of our future upcoming shows. The Campground Catalyst Podcast is proudly sponsored by Beyonder Camp, your trusted partner in fueling your success in outdoor hospitality. Until next time, keep both your campfires and your passions burning.